Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Hey, Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How are things in Chicago today?
Cold?
Cold. All right. There you go. Hey, I'm excited to have you on Chicago and especially investing in Illinois. I hear a lot of people are fleeing from investing in your state. And so I want to hear from somebody boots on the ground, how things are in Illinois. But before we get to that, if you can kind of give us a background of where you started, where are you now and how you got there?
Yeah, so I started back in 2001 or so, buying at the auction block for sheriff sales. I had an interest coming right out of high school in investing in real estate. So I was able to pool together some money through friends and family and figure out the foreclosure process. And that's kind of where I got going. Started buying out there, competing with the big dogs, and, turned it into something.
So that's interesting. Just out of high school, you said, hey, I've got an interest in real estate. I know I'm going to go buy foreclosures.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. That's kind of that's a big gamble. I cut my teeth as well buying foreclosures. And there's a lot of unknowns in that. How did you educate yourself and prevent from making just some catastrophic mistakes?
Yeah. Great question. So, it all kind of started with a late night infomercial that piqued my curiosity and led me down a path to I got to figure this out.
Right.
I got to know more about how this works. So I started reading anything I could get my hands on. I started studying the newspaper because back then we actually had papers where it advertised foreclosures. I started attending the auctions again. So I'm 18, 19 years old. Just seeing how the process worked and hearing everyone discuss it. And, you got the trustee giving the sale, you got the guys that are, bidding on the property and, kind of poking around them a little bit and trying to start conversations, which wasn't that easy because it's competitive, right?
Right.
Competitive now, it was competitive then. And eventually to the point where I'm driving past the properties that are getting advertised for sale, that I'm doing as much research as I could in advance, which there was no, Zillow back then, right?
Right.
So, talking to brokers. At the time, I didn't have a real estate license, but, I found a couple brokers that were willing to help out a little bit. I did find one guy at the auction sales that would be nice enough to have a conversation with me and give me a little bit of insight.
Right.
And then it came down to biting the bullet, man, and putting a bid in. And I got lucky on my first one. It was like a rescheduled foreclosure sale that had previously been scheduled a couple weeks prior, and nobody showed up for it but me.
Wow. Good for you.
I was paying attention. I was like, yep, dollar over.
Right.
And, the guy, the auctioneer, we'll call him, looked at me and said, okay, man, yeah, it's yours. So I went through that process. And then I did again and again. And I actually got quite intimate with the process over time because I became licensed. So I was running my own side of, the brokerage business at that point, started a company brokering and started listing REOs for banks. So we did over 3,000 REOs through that whole upswing after 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Sold a bunch to hedge funds. And yeah, we've had a lot of property pass through these doors.
Right. That's amazing. So you went from buying single family, one at a time, and then decided that you could really scale. And then you took it to the point where obviously the banks are coming to you saying, hey, will you help us dispose of our excess inventory?
Yep. I met a banker at one of the auctions I was at bidding on a property. He started asking me questions about the market. He was from out of state. Back then, again, they used to bid, secondary mortgages would come out and bid on these properties in person sometimes. Made friends with the guy. He gave me my first REO listing.
Gotcha. Explain to our listeners, if you will, what it mean. I understand what you just said because I used to buy foreclosures, but when you say that the banks would come out and bid on the second mortgages, what does that mean?
So when a first mortgage, which would be normally the larger of the two, but the initially recorded mortgage when somebody buys a house is known as the first or first position, we'll call it. And a second position mortgage or second mortgage is something when maybe you borrowed 80% of the first mortgage was put down by, let's say, ABC Bank, and then you still only had 5% down. So a secondary lender came in and put down the additional 15, and you put down 5. So what happens in a foreclosure is when that first position mortgage starts to foreclose, the second position loses their interest. So what'll happen is sometimes these banks will come out and say, well, wait a second, we've got, let's say $50,000 in a mortgage invested in this property or with this borrower, and we're getting foreclosed on, we're going to lose all of that. Maybe we should go bid on it ourselves, or at least bid up that price so we can get our money back.
Right.
Because the way the first position gets paid first at an auction, and then whatever excess gets bid up would go towards the second position or even a third. I mean, again, back in the crash, before the crash, the loans they were giving out, they had second mortgages, third mortgages. People were putting zero money down. I mean, it was crazy time. So
sure.
Not.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's wild. And so those banks would show up and say, hey, we don't want to lose our interest in this, because they could pay off the first. They could afford to pay off the first, retain their rights as the second, and still maybe be underneath the fair market value of the property. So they could turn around and sell the house, and then they get to, obviously pay themselves back. I mean, at worst case scenario, they don't lose any money on it. Best case scenario, they might even make some money.
Right. Correct. That was the goal. Right. So I made a couple contacts at the auction itself, and was able to start building what I would say was a pretty robust REO business, which, at this point we've kind of refocused where we're at. But at the time it was a good deal for a long time. And I felt initially like, hey, I might get first crack at some of these opportunities. That's why I got into it. But the reality was that it's not the case at all, because the brokers that, that are working for the banks cannot buy the properties themselves. But, the intent, and it still worked out very well. We're still able to buy foreclosures at the time from banks that we didn't work for.
So what were you saying now? You were saying banks at the time, it was going great. And then, basically you had to wrap that side of the business up because that line of work basically dried up.
Working as, the brokerage itself is handling REO properties, manages REO. We still do that to this day.
Gotcha.
I refocused my efforts into the investing side again, which is where I originally started. Once I would say 2013, 14 rolled around, there was still plenty of opportunity, and kind of got into wholesaling opportunities more and more acquisition strategies for us.
Right. And that was more on the single family side. Is that where you've stayed, or have you added multifamily and some other commercial assets to your portfolio?
Small amount of multifamily and commercial. Yes. I would say the main focus is still in single family and multi-unit. When I say multi, 4 units or less. But we do have multifamily in the portfolio as well as commercial, just not the main focus, I would say.
Gotcha. But yet you found a way to grow your company that kind of fits what your investing goals are. Can you walk us through some of the maybe mistakes you made along the way or challenges you faced as you grew?
Sure. Yeah. Specific to investing in the portfolio side, you mean?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, first thing is leverage. I would say you got to have the right relationships. And this is probably a little takeaway for your listeners, is everything in this business is about relationships. I mean, I'm just about 20 years in, and having the availability of a private lender that, somebody you've built a relationship with that can give you cash to purchase a property in 2 weeks, or having a bank that can refinance you when you bought a 4-unit property and you've rehabbed it and you need to BRRRR, the BRRRR strategy and get out of it. That's a huge part of the business. Don't take that for granted, and be careful what you're leveraging would be my other piece of advice. I should say how you're leveraging. Cash out refinances can be dangerous. Make sure your numbers work. A lot of people have a tendency to, overanalyze, I would say, but when it comes down to, opportunity, they get driven by emotion and they get excited about something, or they see, they see this awesome opportunity for something without really knowing the true risks that are involved. And what that really comes back to is what your leverage looks like, because everything can work depending on how much leverage you have. When I say leverage, I should say financing.
Gotcha.
Make sure if you're going to do any type of cash out or a BRRRR, that the numbers are always going to make sense, no matter what.
And what you mean by that is that if you do a cash out refi and you end up basically over leveraging the property. I mean, that we saw a lot of that, from 2005 to 2008, and that's where a lot of investors really lost their shirts.
Yes. And I think those are lessons that quickly get forgotten. And I just want to make sure that when even the investors we work with here, excuse me, they're understanding the fact that today's a good day, right? But tomorrow holds something different, and make sure that your cash flow numbers really work. I mean, again, we've got this Corona pandemic going on. You've got some people that are holding these, I would say, potentially hostile tenants that refuse to pay. I mean, I'll be honest, we have one as well.
Sure.
And they won't leave and you can't get them out. I mean, how is that going to look if you multiply that times 10 or times 20, or you've got an apartment building that's got, 24 units and half the people are in that same boat? We got to plan for these things. And I understand the government's, offered some type of incentivization, obviously, to landlords to a degree. You can get some loans and some grants and things like that. And, we've pursued those as well. But, to me, that's a little bit of like icing on the cake. That's nice, but we still are prepared in case things get worse.
What does prepared look like for you?
Stockpiling some cash, making sure that we've got it, in case something goes even worse with, potentially with financing in the banking system. I mean, loans can be called due. Been through that once already with several apartment buildings we've owned. What happens if the bank calls you and says, yeah, we're no longer in the business of working with a small investor who's got less than 100 units, right? We want our $1.1 million back.
Wow. What do you do? What did you do?
Relationships, right? So I was in that exact situation. I was able to refinance with a small local bank, which would also be another tidbit I'd offer to the listeners is big banks aren't always better. And I'm sure this is, your experience in the multifamily space will tell you the same thing. I mean, somebody you can walk into their office, shake their hand, or grab a cup of coffee and a beer with, or have lunch on a routine basis, that's the guy you want to work with. Even if the program isn't maybe the best to what you think you should be able to get comparatively to what you've researched or read, somebody like that is going to have your back. And that's
right.
the person you need to have a relationship with when you get into this business, because those people care and they want to maintain that. And that's also how they eat. So they want to keep eating.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Those, and it sounds like the summary of basically your story is relationships. I mean, the people that you've worked alongside and the people that going from auctions forward, finding those people along the way that can help not just guide you, but also be key industry partners.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I want to offer to, the listener is, there's a lot of information out there. There's YouTube and there's, they call it YouTube University, right? I'm not saying dish out your last, $5,000 to somebody, some type of guru, because he's, feeding you aspirations of grandeur. But what I am saying is interview some people and find somebody that can mentor you along the way if you're serious about getting started in this business and staying in this business, because those relationships are key. I mean,
right.
Picking up the phone and have the availability to call someone and say, hey man, I have a situation, what are you doing or what have you done about this type of similar thing? And having an answer and somebody that can guide you down that path is hugely important.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah. If you're listening to this, that's a key piece of advice. If you could take anything home from this, hear what was just said. Tell us about investing in the Chicago area. I've just, not nothing against Chicago. I love Chicago. It's one of my favorite cities. But I've heard some kind of mixed emotions regarding that, especially when it comes to taxation and things like that. So can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. Taxes are high here. A lot of oversight, a lot of politics. Every municipality in the Chicagoland area is like its own little island, so they all operate differently. You can buy a property in, we'll call it Bellwood, which is on the outskirts of the city of Chicago, and go through one process and have an escrow repair of $10,000 that needs to be put up before you even close, that the city holds on to while you're doing your repairs, and hopefully will give you that money back when they approve your your permits and you get the work done. And then you walk 5 miles to the east and you've got a completely different process where it's like you walk in, buy a transfer stamp, you're out, and there's no permits needing to be pulled at all. So again, goes back to kind of maybe having some guidance from people that know what they're doing. Being prepared for the fact that in Chicago taxes are high, they continue to rise, they continue to go up. Unfortunately,
right.
The population is declining, but we're a major metropolitan area, obviously. So there's always industry here. There's always people coming here, though it may be declining in general. I think a lot of that's a baby boomer aspect as well. They're looking for the sunshine states and things like that, where taxes are less, or maybe there's no state taxes. Florida, for example. But we're still robust as far as the real estate industry here. I mean, there's a lot of there's new construction going in. There's a lot of investors buying. There's a lot of competitiveness here, and the bonus to that is our rents are pretty healthy as well. So you can cash flow decently on a property here. You know, $400, $500, $600 a month just on a single family if you buy right.
Gotcha. So it really, again, not to harp the same point, but it sounds like knowing the right people in the right municipalities that understand the logistics of how to get through the process is important.
Yeah, and there's just like everywhere, right? There's a lot of local REIAs. Everybody's willing to help out or give you some piece of advice. I mean, everybody loves to hear themselves talk. So you ask them. But yeah, I mean, you can, being such a large city, having the availability of people is the easy part, right? And there's a lot of knowledge here. So my piece of advice, if people are looking to invest in Chicago, would be to, again, find somebody that's local, that is active in the market, and start asking some questions. And, we get calls like that all the time where people are just getting started in wholesaling, or they're getting started in building a rental portfolio. And of course, I take calls and say, yeah, man, here's what you need to look out for in that area, for example.
Right. That's awesome. Joe, you've given us some excellent pieces of advice here today. As we get into the final four, if you were to distill everything you know into one piece of advice and you were giving this to an aspiring investor, what would that one piece of advice be?
Absorb everything, read as much as you can. And I'll use that as a general term, right? But more specifically, there's some great podcasts out there. You've got a podcast going, great guests, great information coming out. All that free information is huge. I mean, constantly researching and listening and learning. Don't stop.
That's awesome. What's one way that you stay on top of your game?
That's exactly what I just said. I mean, I was reading an article this morning on the 20 top markets in the U.S. And studying it because we're actively looking for other markets to start wholesaling in. So I'm looking at some areas in Ohio and Tennessee. We've actually, done some work in Birmingham already, and just continuing to research and build that knowledge base, because that's something you can retain forever, and it's never going to make you, it's always going to make you a stronger investor.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to giving back, what's one way you make the world a better place?
So this would be related to investing as well. This year I started I would call it a free mentoring group for some local investors. It's called the 2020 Partnership. And we're when I say we, it's we have a team here. I have a business partner on the wholesale side of my business. And we're actively mentoring these individuals at no cost to get started in the business itself. And it's been greatly rewarding, not only on a personal level, but also financially, because we've been able to do a bunch of deals with some of these guys and gals and get them started in the business. And that's probably with a feather in my cap for this year.
That's such a rarity. I mean, there are people out there that are charging tens of thousands of dollars, teaching the same exact things that you're giving away for free. So good for you, both for rewarding just the rewards, personally for, giving back, but also, obviously, like you said, as you build these networks, you're probably also rewarding, yourself financially when they bring deals across the table. So it's a win-win.
Exactly. You hit it on the head. That's exactly what's been going on. And it's amazing. It's been great to build these relationships and network with more people, and opportunity presents itself.
Right. Absolutely. Joe, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
So we have a title company that we run, and I'll give out that website just because it's just an easy general place and it kind of sums up a lot of what we do here. And that's www.investorstitleservicesllc.com.
Gotcha. Joe, thanks for coming on today. Certainly appreciate it. Loved your nuggets of wisdom, and everything you shared with us has been great. So certainly appreciate it, and look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
For your time.